Sword of the Seven Suns by Gardner F. Fox, originally published in Planet Stories, Spring 1947. Read by Jon Gill. Part 16. The sun lay like a crimson ball on the horizon, flooded with its red rays were the waving grass fields and the riders of the megathorns that sped across them. Hooves rose and fell as the stallions' heads stretched forward, eager for the run. Flayn and Evelyn rode side by side. There were bandages still on their arms, on Flayn's chest and thigh. Behind them thundered Bessel, the blond Darksider, and a Dular from the Mornal. The cool wind in his face made Flayn grin, made him stare, in sheer gladness for being alive, at the grassy plain, the swollen crimson sun, the distant blue mountains. He had not thought to be alive today. There had been confusion in the mesa after he had laughed. The Metniks were all for throwing him into the gorge, but the Darksiders saw in him their savior of their prophecy, and would not have him touched. "This is the key to the machine," Flayn informed them, showing them the ruined blade. "The blade is the key." "The blade is gone," growled a sullen Mechnik. "Not all of it, only the foible of the blade. The forte remains. It may be sufficient to turn the lock. It is worth a try. Speak out. Do I go to Clarn with a safe conduct, or do you try throwing me in the gorge?" The giant blonde came to Flayn's side and lifted his club. "I, Bessel, promise safe conduct for the keeper," he roared, looking at the Mechniks with sullen eye. "And any of you who interferes shall be treated as enemies." As sullenly the Mechniks agreed. They could not do otherwise, for without the Darksiders, they were no match for the Duelers of Clarn. One of them said, "But we cannot vouchsafe a passage through the city itself. Other Mechniks might not agree with us." "I'll risk that," snapped Flayn. "I have gone through them once. I can do it again." Later, when they were alone, Flayn said to Evelyn, "It is but a forlorn hope. When the stem of a key is gone, the lock will not open, and the foible of this blade is part of the key too, and its powder on the rocks." "Then why go to Clarn at all?" sighed Evelyn, out of the weariness of her spirit, tired of seeing men die and blood run red. "Because there is still a chance. A slim one, true, but a chance." Her eyes were dark and worshipping, staring up at his grim face. She whispered, "Brood of the Space Wanderers, you never quit, do you, Flayn? You always keep on, even after you've failed." "My stubbornness hasn't hurt us yet. I wouldn't give up on the desert unless I won the sword and you. I kept Hearth fighting, and we've discovered that the sword is a key to the machine. Now, the All-High can see in his cave, he shall see." The Darksiders provided them with swift, tireless megathons. Flayn missed Soral, but Soral was in Mornal now. If the Magnus ship got back... Take two. Flayn missed Soral, but Soral was in Mornal now, if the Magnus ship got back. The dun mount he straddled was a good beast. When they were in the saddle, Bessel swung onto a black stallion beside him. "I go as a watchdog, Flayn of Clarn. If you fail, I carry word to the Darksiders to bring fire and steel through the cities of Clarnva." "Good enough," Flayn grunted, and Evelyn pressed his hands with hers, bowing her head, biting her lips until a drop of blood welled. They crossed the mountain trails and headed out over the plains. The great sand stretches were dotted by desert plants that lifted thorny branches towards the clear sky. It was a land of peace, where cactus dwelt with mesquite, and the riotous reds and yellows of the wildflowers splashed the desert with color. Flayn wondered whether this peace would soon be shattered by the flaming red clamor of war. His thought almost came to reality on the third day. At noon, the riders sighted a vast host moving towards them from the west. Flayn stood in his stirrups, staring beneath a palm. Then Evelyn saw the maroon pennons fluttering from glittering lance-tops and cried, "They come from Mornal!" There were golden swans among the maroon banners. She said again, "The men of Yila! Truly, the Clarnva are gathered to fight it out with the Darksiders." A cluster of horsemen broke from the array and galloped towards them. Flayn and Evelyn and Bessel met them with palms extended, although the warriors had long since recognized the fiery hair of the girl. At Bessel they shot dark glances, and some of them fingered the hafts of their swords. Flayn told them his story swiftly. The deputation from Mornal and Yila drew away, whispered among themselves with many gestures, once in a while glancing toward Flayn and the half sword that hung at his side. An old man with hair the color of mountain snow broke from their group and came to Flayn. "We will abide by the trial of the sword," he said simply. "If the machine works, then we will gladly live in peace with the Darksiders and the Mechniks of Clarn. We will help establish you as keeper of the machine, Flayn of Clarn, that all may share its benefits." Bessel grunted his surprise. I never thought to hear a man of Murnau speak words like that. The warrior smiled grimly. I am an old man. When I remember how life was in my mouth, he sighed, I would be friend of any who helped to bring it back. The old man flung up an arm to his retainer and wheeled his horse beside Flane's stallion. He explained, I go as Bessel does, to bring my people the word, war or peace. They rode many days across the grasslands and into the desert, skirting that until they came to an ancient rock road, and how they galloped into a red sunset, knowing that before the 3 moons rose they would see the spires of Clarn in the distance. Within an hour they drew rein, clustered together, silent, sitting their saddles on a hill. They all looked at the black towers of Clarn crouching below them, at the domed temple of flat-roofed houses. The red dragon gate seemed covered with blood in the last rays of sun. We must go unseen to that city, Flane said, and as unseen find the temple of the machine. There will be guards of the dragon gate. Leave them to me. The beacon lights in the dragon's mouth roared gustily, glared scarlet in the blue darkness, where Flane came out of it with a naked dagger in his hand. His rush toppled both guards. Before their writhing mouths could make a sound, his right arm lifted, drove downward twice with slim steel blade. He straddled the still forms, curving an arm at the others, who slipped from saddle to earth and came toward him. We must be swift, Flane said. The Mechnics don't know of the truce their kind have made. Do not be seen, or we'll never reach the temple. Through side streets and alleyways Flane led them, where shadows bulked black and grim, their running forms made odd silhouettes between 2 columns. They paused to stare at the temple. It loomed gigantic in the blackness. Bessel grunted softly. I've never seen anything like it. Then they were going across the quadrangle, stooping low, eyes peering left and right. The sentry whirled as Flane came for him, but he whirled too slow. A brawny forearm larked across his throat, and he died with steel in his chest. Flane drove into the temple, across its tiled floor. He came to a stop before the machine. The others came softly forward. They stood a little behind him, staring at the metal bulk, whose levers and dials shone with reflected light from the 3 moons swirling across the skies. Evelyn sobbed wearily. Bessel whispered prayers to his dark side gods. The old warrior whispered, I have not looked on the glory of Clarn for many years, but it seems only as yesterday that I saw and heard the Keeper explaining its function. It works by radiation, you know. The globe's filled with whitish powder, stored up sun energy via the yellow prison in the desert. Solar energy, he called it. The machine, when it works, picks up the energy and sends it all over Clarn in bands of power that drive all engines. It heats our cities, it lights our lights, it fires our guns, it even feeds us by helping to raise food. At least it used to. Flane tried not to think of the utter weariness in the old man's voice as he stepped forward. With his right hand he drew out the ruined sword, stared down at it, ran a fingertip along the shattered blade. The old man voiced the weariness of the Clarn. If the machine failed to work, Flane did not like to think of that. He stepped forward, lifting the blade. He thrust it home. In the diamond-shaped opening, the blade clicked in, fitting perfectly. And nothing happened. The machine was truly dead above them. Evelyn sobbed. She came to stand with him, pressing her arm shoulder to his in comfort as he leaned against the cold metal side of the machine, hammering his fist against it until knuckles bled. Behind them, Bessel sighed. Now that is too bad. I shall hate to order the Katratale banners forward, but I have no choice. Flane lifted his hand, looking down at the torn flesh, at the dark blood staining his flesh. Evelyn was whispering to him, but he did not hear. He was deaf to everything at that moment. A hand patted his arm sadly, and then the old man from Murnau turned on his heel and went out of the temple, bowed and broken. With him went Bessel. In the quadrangle before the temple they came to a stop and stared at each other. The big Darksider saw tears furrowing the cheeks of the old man. I had thought to see a new world, Bessel. The old world come to life again. Gaiety and laughter, play and sunshine. I thought Flane was the one the prophecy told of, with his foreign blood and his blue sword. I would have staked my neck on it. Yes, grunted Bessel. So too would I. War, groaned the old man. There will be nothing left of Clarn, nothing, except a few wandering tribes. The city-states will go. Darksider and Clarnvan will eat each other up. Bessel nodded glumly. Heavily they strode to the Red Dragon Gate. Swinging into the saddles, they swung their horses' heads around and cantered into the night. From the temple balcony that overlooked the city, Flayn and Evelyn watched them. Like toys they seemed, rider and mount blending motion into infinite grace. They saw Bessel and the old man lift their right arms, salute. Saw them take separate paths as they rode on. Each goes to summon his people to war, Flayn said heavily. Evelyn leaned her cheek against his bare, scarred arm. Failure, Flayn rasped harshly with a bitter laugh. I failed all right. Now will there be a war, and nothing but war. The Dulars of Clarn and Mornal and Yila against the Darksiders and Mekniks. Few will survive. Evelyn turned him slowly, traced the lines of his cheeks and mouth with quivering fingertips. 2 tears glistened beneath her lashes as she struggled to smile. We may still make a new world, she whispered. It is not too late. When those riders reach their armies, a wave of steel and fire will rise over Clarn. Evelyn rubbed her face against his throat. She whispered, I love you, Flayn. Together we may bring order out of chaos, somehow. You are still my keeper. Listen, darling, she went on, raising her glowing face to his. I swear fealty to the bearer of the sun-starred sword, for he shall be my keeper. By the grip that plunges home the blade, by the hand that is turned away, by the... She broke off, alarmed. Her brown eyes sought Flayn's face, read it, saw hope struggling to rise through bitterness. His green eyes danced, his lips grew slack. He hugged her to him, kissed lips and cheeks and chin. That's it! That's it! He shouted. He leapt for the temple interior, and Evelyn had to run to keep up with him. Half laughing and half crying, she sobbed, What is it, Flayn? The way the sword goes home. I was a fool not to have realized it. We're going to try the machine again, with the sword. But it doesn't work, you saw that. Flayn laughed. No harm to try once more, is there? He came before the machine and picked up the sword where he had dropped it in his despair. To the star friezes in the wall, he came and held out the sword to Evelyn. In holding the hilt of a sword in combat, you usually grasp it with the ends of the fingers towards you, as in a parry and tierce. Now suppose I turn the hand away, like this, so that the fingertips are away from me, and the back of my hand is towards me. By the grip that plunges home the blade, by the hand that is turned away, with the back of his hand toward him, Flayn slammed in the sword. The 5 tiny stars embedded in the star guard began to glow weirdly in their blue transparent envelope. Dully, they shone at first, then grew more brilliant until they blazed like tiny suns. They twinkled, fitted over the star-shaped frieze in the wall of the machine. Flayn stared at them. He knew suddenly, and laughed aloud. It isn't the blade that does it, he cried in his delight. There is no key, not a key such as we know. The machine operates via those lights in the star-shaped guard of the sword, Evelyn. They must be bits of that white powder stored in the prism. They are solar energy. Look how they shine in the machine. They shimmered magically inside the blue stuff, glowing and pulsating with white fire. Evelyn cried out, a hand lifted, pointing. The lights were going on, all over Clarn. One by one they came into being, glimmering fitfully as long unused filaments, surged with flooded power. Whitely they shone, then grew bright and still brighter. A pale halo of reflection lifted from street and house and rooftop, bathing the city in its dim aura. From the houses came the cries and screams of men and women. The screams deepened, grew into a roar, a bellow of sheer, unbelievable joy, of incredulous happiness. Flayn and Evelyn heard the triumphant peal of it. The hope became reality in its tones. They shivered in delight, laughing. Flayn drew her, an arm about her lissom waist, out with him onto the balcony. Beneath them the city was aflame with brilliance. Evelyn whispered, You turned another failure into your biggest success, Flayn. You made the machine work. If you hadn't... She shuddered and crept closer in his arms. Her voice was dreamy as she went on. Now your word will be the law of all Clarn. The Darksiders under Bessel will see that. You are their champion. The Dulars will be so happy to have their lights and heat again that they will acknowledge you too. And the Mekniks, well, they were heavily outnumbered, and when they see what the machine will do for them, they'll agree. Their power will fade as night when the lights went on. Dawn was breaking all over Clarn. The end. Thank you.